Hey, Tony Jones here, and I have been extremely busy getting ready for the Christianity 21 event in October and the theological conversation with Jürgen Moltmann coming up in September. So both events hosted by Jopa Productions, a company that I run with Doug Paget. So, a little tight on blogging time, and thought I would respond to a lot of the comments that have been made on my blog post from last week in video form. First of all, to thank so many of you who've commented, and that's the first thing I've learned about asking an honest question about the gays in the church, and that is that it's still, no surprise, I suppose, brings up a lot of emotion in people. And at this point, we stand at 376 comments. Better check that to see if I'm right. Which is by far, 376 comments. By far the most of any of my 3 blogs that I've had dating back for 5 years. So, thank you for commenting. A lot of the comments have been people shocked and horrified that I asked that the 6 verses in the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament, and the Christian scriptures, the New Testament, not be considered when arguing for or against, particularly I suppose against, whether practicing gay and lesbian persons can be full-fledged members of the Church of Jesus Christ and follow Jesus Christ. A lot of people took that to mean, because they didn't really read the question and they haven't obviously been following my blog, that I don't think those 6 verses should ever be considered. I don't think that, clearly. I have studied those passages myself. I've done quite a bit of reading on them. I am of the school of thought that when read in their appropriate context, that they don't prohibit the kind of relationships that I've been advocating for on my blog, and that a lot of my friends who are gay and lesbian persons are trying to live out as fully embracing Jesus Christ and the church, and also living in long-term monogamous, committed homosexual relationships. So I said, for the sake of argument, let's not consider those 6 verses. Well, for a lot of you, that's just incomprehensible. I'm sorry, but I'm challenging you to think a little more broadly than just exegeting those 6 verses. And the old God said it, I believe it, that settles it, which is a really, really thin hermeneutic to use in understanding the narrative of the Bible. A lot of people, several people did try to delve in and talk about this issue on theological and philosophical grounds without resorting to those 6 verses, what some people call the clobber verses. Some of the arguments I've discussed before, I don't find them compelling. The parts don't fit, or it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. These are pithy little sayings, but they don't actually hold much water, because there's also, for instance, it was Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. The Bible leaves all sorts of questions about the sexual relations in the very early days. If you were to take the first several chapters of Genesis, the pre-Abrahamic stories in Genesis, literally, as though they happened actually historically, which I don't, but if you did, you've got a lot of questions to ask, like, where did the women come from, and things of that nature. I know there are answers for these. I don't think they're particularly compelling. But there are lots of questions to answer about who had sex with whom to procreate and make babies in the very early days. Another reason probably not to take those early chapters of Genesis in that sense, literally. The arguments that I have found the most compelling as I've read through the comments, which I do read through all the comments, are the ones that deal with that somehow there's something inherent in a relationship, in a sexual relationship, that is not potentially procreative, that therefore inhibits one's relationship with God. But that brings up all sorts of questions like, can a sexual relationship between a man who's had a vasectomy and a woman still be, would that sexual relationship inhibit one of those persons or both of those persons' relationship with Christ? Or with a postmenopausal woman? Or we could go on and on, right? Of all sorts of ways that people are engaged in loving, committed sexual relationships that aren't necessarily procreative. Other than that, I continue to wait for a good, compelling argument that doesn't resort to the 6 clobber verses that says there's something inherent in a gay relationship or a lesbian relationship, something inherent in it that keeps someone from following Christ. All right, thanks for all your comments. Talk to you later.